The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any human building ever built. Pillars of white stone rose toward a ceiling painted with stars from 1,000 worlds. Representatives from 40 species sat in their floating chairs, arranged in a half-circle around the central speaking platform. The air smelled of different atmospheres, pumped through invisible vents to keep each species comfortable. Ambassador Tae Jin stood alone on that platform. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had stood in this same spot many times before. 40 years of petitions. 40 years of requests. 40 years of being told that humanity was too young, too primitive, too unimportant to deserve an equal voice. Today would be different. He could feel it in his bones. High Speaker Vorath, of the Alari, leaned forward in his chair. His blue skin shimmered under the chamber lights. His 4 eyes blinked, one at a time. A gesture that humans had learned meant amusement. Or contempt. With the Alari, there was little difference. The Council has reviewed humanity's petition for equal voting rights, Vorath said. His voice echoed through the hall. Again, soft laughter rippled through the chamber. The Veltari delegates clicked their mandibles. The Karathi representatives shifted in their seats with knowing smiles. After careful consideration, Vorath continued, "The Council has determined that humanity has not yet demonstrated the maturity required for full membership. Your species is barely 300 years into space travel. You have much to learn before you can sit as equals among us." Tae Jin listened. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. He had argued before, many times, and it had changed nothing. "The petition is denied," Vorath finished. "Perhaps in another century, humanity will be ready." The chamber fell silent. Everyone waited for the human ambassador to protest, to beg, to make some passionate speech about fairness and justice. That was what humans always did. They were emotional creatures, after all, primitive, predictable. But Tae Jin simply nodded. "Then humanity thanks the Council for its time," he said. His voice was calm and clear. "We will trouble you no further." He gathered his documents from the speaking podium. He placed them neatly in his case. He bowed once, a gesture of respect that humans had always shown despite never receiving it in return. Then he walked toward the exit. No anger. No threats. No tears. Just footsteps echoing across the marble floor. High Speaker Vorath watched him go with all 4 eyes. Something felt wrong, but he could not name it. The human had accepted defeat to easily. But then again, what choice did they have? Humanity was small. Humanity was weak. They needed the Council far more than the Council needed them. Or so Vorath believed. 3 days later, President Kim Hanna addressed the United Terran Assembly on Earth. She was 51 years old, with sharp eyes and a voice that carried across crowds. Behind her hung the flag of unified Earth, blue and green against a field of stars. "For 300 years we have reached out to the galaxy," she began. "We have offered friendship. We have offered partnership. We have sent our best doctors to heal the sick on distant worlds. We have sent our engineers to build stations in the void. We have sent our farmers to feed the hungry, our teachers to share knowledge, our soldiers to defend those who could not defend themselves." She paused. The assembly was completely silent, and for 300 years we have been told we are not enough. Not old enough. Not advanced enough. Not worthy enough to sit as equals among the stars. Her hands rested on the podium. She did not grip it in anger. She did not tremble with emotion. She simply stood, calm and certain. "Today, I announce the quiet protocol. Humanity will honor every existing contract and agreement until its natural end. We will not break our word. We will not abandon anyone who depends on us without warning. But when those contracts expire, we will not renew them. Our people will come home. Our ships will return to Earth. Our hands will build for ourselves, not for those who despise us." Gasps filled the assembly hall. Representatives from Luna, Mars, and the outer colonies exchanged worried glances. "This is not war," President Kim continued. "This is not revenge. This is simply acceptance. The Council has made its feelings clear again and again for 40 years. We choose to believe them. We choose to leave. Admiral Yoon Seong received his orders the next morning. He was a large man with a calm face and hands that had seen both war and peace. His job was simple: bring everyone home. Over the following months, human ships appeared at stations across the galaxy. They came not with weapons, but with moving crates. Engineers packed their tools. Doctors handed over patient files. Teachers said goodbye to students they had taught for decades. On the mining world of Keth Prime, human workers gathered their belongings and walked to their ships. The Keth managers watched them go with confusion. Who would work the dangerous deep tunnels now? The humans had always done that work. It was beneath everyone else. On the medical station, orbiting Veltari Prime, Dr. Park Suman spent her last week training anyone who would listen. Only 3 Veltari nurses came to her classes. The rest considered her techniques too crude to bother learning. She left her notes anyway, translated into 6 languages. She hoped someone would read them someday, on the communication relay station at the edge of known space. Engineer Choi Do-hyun shut down his workshop for the last time. He had spent 15 years requesting assistants, apprentices, anyone who could learn how the systems worked. Every request had been denied. Humans were good with their hands, the Council said, but lacked the intelligence for true understanding. He left behind manuals, diagrams, step-by-step, instructions written so clearly that a child could follow them. He hoped it would be enough. Across the galaxy, the Council watched humanity's withdrawal with amusement. High Speaker Varath called it a tantrum. The Korathi predicted humans would return within a year, begging for scraps. The Veltari barely noticed it all. They were certain of one thing: the galaxy did not need humanity. Within 6 months, they would begin to understand how wrong they were. The first reports came from Keth Prime. Merchant Guild leader Doran stood at the entrance to Mineshaft 7, staring into the darkness below. The tunnel stretched down for miles, carved through rock that glowed with valuable ore. For 200 years, human workers had descended into these depths every day. They had breathed the toxic air. They had endured the crushing pressure. They had pulled wealth from the stone with their bare hands. Now the tunnels were empty. Doran had tried to hire replacements. He had offered good wages, better than what the humans had received, but no other species would take the job. The Veltari considered manual labor beneath them. The Korathi lacked the endurance. The Alari never worked with their hands at all. Even the lowest workers from a dozen worlds refused to enter the mines. It's too dangerous, they said. Let someone else do it. But there was no one else. There had only ever been humans. Within 3 months, Keth Prime's economy collapsed. The ore stopped flowing. The factories went silent. Ships that once carried riches to distant markets now sat empty in the ports. Doran sent desperate messages to the Council, begging for help. The Council sent advisors. The advisors looked at the mines, read the reports, and shook their heads. Find other workers, they suggested. There are no other workers, Doran replied. The advisors had no answer for that. On Veltari Prime.
Ow.
The medical crisis began slowly. At first, it was just longer waiting times at hospitals. Then it was patients who could not be treated. Then it was deaths that should have been prevented. Dr. Park. Sumin had been the only surgeon in the sector who could perform neural reconstruction. She had developed the technique herself, adapting human medical knowledge to alien biology. For 30 years, she had saved lives that everyone else considered lost. The Veltari had watched her work with cold eyes. They had called her methods crude, primitive, unworthy of proper study. When she offered to teach them, they laughed. Why would superior beings learn from a human? Now her operating room sat empty. Her tools gathered dust. The patients kept coming, but no one could help them. Hospital Director Kell reviewed the death counts each morning. The numbers grew larger every week. He sent requests to medical schools across the sector, asking if anyone had studied human techniques. The answer was always the same. No one had bothered. He found Dr. Park's notes in a storage room, still in their original packaging. No one had even opened them. Kel spent 3 days trying to understand the first page. The concepts were simple enough for a human student, for a Veltari who had never considered human knowledge worth learning. They were impossible. He sent a message to Earth, addressed to Dr. Park directly. He asked if she would return just for a few years, just to train new surgeons. The message bounced back undelivered. Earth was no longer accepting communications from the Council, or its member worlds. The communication network began failing in the fifth month. Engineer Choi Du-haen had designed the relay stations that connected the galaxy. His systems were elegant and efficient, built on principles that humans had developed over centuries of radio and quantum research. He had maintained them personally for 15 years, traveling from station to station, keeping the signals flowing. Now the stations were breaking down one by one. On Relay Station 12, Technician Vera of the Solani stared at a console covered in warning lights. She had been assigned to maintain the station after the human engineers left. She had received 3 days of training from a supervisor who had received 2 days of training from someone who had never actually touched the equipment. The manual sat beside her. Written in clear universal standard, she had read it many times. She understood the words. But when she tried to follow the instructions, nothing worked. She opened a panel and looked at the wires inside. They were arranged in patterns she did not recognize, connected in ways that made no sense to her. Engineer Choi had built these systems by hand, following instincts developed through a lifetime of practice. His hands had known things that his manuals could not capture. Vera closed the panel and sent a report to her superiors. The station would fail within 2 weeks. She did not know how to stop it. Her superiors sent back a simple reply. Try harder. Council Adjutant Mira of the Solani was one of the few who had seen this coming. She had served on the council for 60 years, watching humanity's contributions grow while their recognition shrank. She had argued for human rights many times. She had been ignored many times. Now she stood before High Speaker Vorath with a report that would change everything. 37%, she said. Vorath blinked his 4 eyes. 37% of what? Of galactic infrastructure, designed, built, or maintained by humans. Mira placed the data tablet on his desk. Mining operations, medical facilities, communication networks, transport routes, agricultural systems. All of it dependent on human workers, human technology, human knowledge. Vorath waved a dismissive hand. Others will learn to replace them. How? Who will teach them? Mira leaned forward. We refused to learn from humans while they were here. We called their methods crude. We called their knowledge primitive. Now they are gone, and we have nothing. This is temporary, Vorath insisted. The galaxy functioned before humans arrived. It will function after they leave. Mira shook her head slowly. The galaxy you remember no longer exists. For 300 years, humans quietly made themselves essential. We never noticed because we never thought they mattered. She picked up her data tablet and walked toward the door. In 6 months, you will remember this conversation, she said. You will wish you had listened. Vorath watched her leave. For a moment, just a moment, doubt flickered in his 4 eyes. Then he pushed it away. Humans were primitive creatures. They would come crawling back eventually. They always did. He was certain of it. 2 years passed. The galaxy learned to remember. On the agricultural world of Tessith, the fields had turned to dust. Where green crops once stretched to the horizon, now there was only brown earth and dying plants. The irrigation system still worked. The weather stations still functioned. But something was wrong with the soil itself. No one knew how to fix it. Farmer Beek Youngji had worked these fields for 30 years. She had arrived as a young woman with nothing but her family's knowledge and her own strong hands. The Tessothians had laughed at her methods. She planted strange crops between their rows. She let certain weeds grow instead of killing them. She spread foul-smelling mixtures on the ground and called it medicine for the earth. But her fields produced twice as much as anyone else's. Her soil grew richer each year, while theirs grew thin. Slowly, carefully, she had healed the damage that centuries of careless farming had caused. She had offered to teach anyone who wanted to learn. She had held classes every season, open to all species. Sometimes one or two curious Tessotheans would attend. Most years, no one came at all. When she left, she gave her notes to the local farming council. Detailed instructions on soil health, explanations of nutrient cycles, simple techniques that any farmer could learn. The council filed her notes in an archive and never looked at them again. Humans had no real understanding of agriculture, they believed. They were simply lucky. Now the luck had run out. Governor Tessith walked through his dying fields with tears in his 3 eyes. His people faced famine for the first time in 600 years. Ships from other worlds could bring food, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Someone found Baekhyungji's notes in the archive, covered in dust. The governor read them himself, page by page. The techniques were simple. A child could have followed them, but it was too late for this season's crops. Maybe next year. If they survived that long, the Karathi Empire's defensive grid went dark on a cold morning in winter. Commander Yoon Ho-sung had designed that grid during the Second Swarm War. He had been a young officer then, brilliant and creative, with ideas that no one else could understand. The swarm had been eating worlds, billions of lives lost to their hunger. The Karathi military had tried everything and failed. Yoon had built the grid from nothing. He had used human mathematics, human physics, human intuition. He had connected 1,000 satellites into a single thinking machine that could predict where the swarm would strike before they knew themselves. He had saved the Karathi homeworld and 12 other planets. The Karathi had given him a medal. Then they had asked him to leave. His presence made them uncomfortable, they explained. A primitive human in their halls of command, a reminder that their great empire had needed saving by a lesser species. Better for everyone if he retired quietly. He had gone without complaint. But before leaving, he had submitted a request. Let him train Karathi engineers to maintain the grid. Let him pass on his knowledge so the system would work forever. The request was denied. Karathi engineers were perfectly capable of maintaining their own defenses, the general said. They did not need human help. For 20 years, the grid functioned perfectly. It had been built to last. Then the first satellite failed. Then another. Then a dozen at once. Karathi engineers rushed to fix the problems. They opened maintenance panels and found circuits arranged in patterns they had never seen. They read technical manuals written in standard, but the words described concepts that did not exist in Karathi science. Yoon had built the grid using principles that humans understood instinctively, methods developed through centuries of innovation. The Karathi had never bothered to learn those principles. They had assumed their own knowledge was superior. Now they stared at dead screens. Watching their empire's defenses crumble, General Krath sent a message to Earth, addressed to Commander Yoon personally. The message contained an apology and an offer. Any price he named, any honor he wanted. If he would only return, the message went unanswered. Across the galaxy, the same scenes repeated again and again. The transport hub at Stellar Junction shut down when its human traffic controllers left. Other species tried to manage the thousands of ships that passed through each day, but they could not match human reaction speeds. Crashes became common. Trade slowed to a crawl. The power stations on 12 worlds flickered and failed. Human engineers had designed fail-safe systems that required human hands to reset them. No one else could reach the manual switches. It's built for human bodies and human strength. The research station at the edge of known space fell silent. Its human scientists had been studying the ancient ruins of a dead civilization. They had made discoveries that could have changed everything. Now their notes sat in locked computers, protected by passwords that no one knew. Everywhere, the same question echoed. What else did we lose? The answer was devastating. Humans had been everywhere, not conquering, not ruling, but helping. They had asked for nothing but respect. They had received neither respect nor thanks. Council Adjutant Mira presented her final report to a chamber, filled with worried faces. The laughter was gone now. The contempt had turned to fear. Humanity did not need us, she said quietly. We needed them. We were too proud to see it. We were too foolish to admit it. High Speaker Voreth sat in his floating chair, smaller somehow than before. His 4 eyes stared at nothing. What do we do now? Someone asked. Mira had no answer. For the first time in her long life, she had no answer at all. The galaxy had built itself on human shoulders without ever looking down to see. Who was carrying the weight? Now those shoulders were gone, and the whole structure was beginning to fall. The council fractured on a day that should have been ordinary. Representative Olan of the Tessithians stood in the great hall where humans had once begged for scraps of recognition. His voice shook with rage as he read the charges: negligence, discrimination, willful ignorance, and the systematic exploitation of an entire species for 300 years. High Speaker Vorath sat in his chair like a statue. His 4 eyes watched Olan without blinking. Round him, the chamber had divided into factions. Some representatives shouted in his defense. Others demanded his removal. Most sat in uncomfortable silence, wondering how things had gone so wrong. We have evidence, Olan continued, of 40 years of dismissed petitions. Every time humanity asked for equal standing, they were refused. Every time they offered to share their knowledge, they were mocked. We took their labor, their skills, their very lives, and we gave them nothing but contempt in return. He held up a data tablet showing the records. Ambassador Tae Woo-jin's patient face appeared on screens throughout the chamber, request after request, denial after denial, stretching back decades. This is not a failure of one leader, Olan said. This is a failure of all of us. We built our civilization on their backs, and then told them they were worthless. The vote came 3 days later. Vorath was removed from his position and exiled from council space. But his removal changed nothing. The damage was already done. A desperate delegation traveled to Earth. They found the blue planet surrounded by ships that had never existed before. Sleek designs, unlike anything in galactic records. Engines that made no sound but moved faster than light. Weapons that glowed with energies that council scientists could not identify. The delegation's ship was stopped at the edge of the solar system by a single human vessel. Its commander was polite but firm. Earth was not accepting visitors from council space. The delegation could state their business through communication channels. They begged for a personal meeting. They needed to speak with someone, anyone, who could help them rebuild what had been lost. After 3 days of waiting, permission was granted. They were allowed to land at a single location, a small village on an island in the Eastern Sea. Former Ambassador Tae Woo-jin met them in his garden. He was 70 years old now. His hair completely white. His hands were covered in dirt from the vegetables he had been planting. He wore simple clothes and a kind smile. The delegation fell to their knees before him. Please, their leader begged. The galaxy is dying. Our systems are failing. Our people are starving. We need humanity's help. Woo-jin looked at them for a long moment. Then he gestured toward a wooden bench beneath a flowering tree. Sit, he said. Rest. You have come a long way. He served them tea with his own hands. Simple cups, simple leaves, water from a stream that ran through his garden. The delegation drank in confused silence. You wonder why I am not angry, Tae said. It was not a question. They nodded. I was angry once. Many years ago, when I was young, he sat across from them, his old joints creaking. I believed that if I spoke well enough, argued clearly enough, showed enough evidence, the council would see reason. I believed in justice. He sipped his tea. But the council did not want justice. They wanted to feel superior. No argument could change that, so I stopped arguing. Will you return? The delegation leader asked. Will humanity come back to us? Tae shook his head slowly. That is not my decision to make. I'm just an old man with a garden, but I can tell you what humanity has learned in these 5 years of silence. He gestured toward the sky. We were told our contributions were insignificant, that we were too young, too primitive to understand true greatness. So we went home and asked ourselves, What can we achieve if no one tells us what is impossible? He smiled. The answer surprised us. On the other side of the planet, General Shin Ara commanded a defense force that had never fired a shot. Her ships were better than anything the Council had ever built. Her soldiers were trained in ways that Council military academies had never imagined. She had spent 5 years preparing for a war that might never come, in a laboratory in the mountains. Scientist Han Myra worked on technologies that would have seemed like magic to galactic engineers. She had grown up knowing nothing of Council science. No one had told her which ideas were possible and which were foolish dreams. So she had tried everything, and some of it had worked. Humanity had not retreated in defeat, had simply been freed. President No Suhain released a statement that same day. His words were broadcast to every world that still had working communication systems. "The door remains open," he said. "It always has been. Humanity does not seek revenge. We never did. But those who wish to walk through that door must first acknowledge where it leads. Not to a master and servant. Not to a teacher and student. To equals, or to nothing at all." The delegation returned to Council space with his message. They had hoped for immediate salvation. Instead, they had received a challenge. "Change your ways," humanity had said. "Become better, and we can talk." It was not the answer the galaxy wanted, but it was the only answer humanity would give. 5 years after humanity's quiet departure, the Galactic Council dissolved. The vote was unanimous. Every species that had once sat in those floating chairs agreed. The old system had failed. Not just in its treatment of humans, but in its very foundation. A government built on pride and prejudice could not survive contact with the truth. In its place, a new assembly formed. The rules were different this time. Every species, regardless of age or advancement, would have an equal voice. Decisions would require real consensus, not the bullying of the powerful over the weak. The reforms that Vorath had called impossible were implemented in a single session. The Great Hall was rebuilt. The old chairs were removed, replaced with simple seats arranged in a circle. No one would sit above another. No one would look down on their neighbor's council. Adjutant Mira, now called High Adjutant of the new assembly, oversaw the changes. She had spent her whole life fighting for what was right. She had been ignored, mocked, and dismissed. Now, at last, the galaxy was ready to listen. But one empty seat remained in the circle. The seat reserved for Earth. A delegation was formed. Not like the desperate beggars who had visited Tae Woo Jin's garden years before. This delegation came with humility and hope. They carried no demands, no conditions, no expectations. Only an invitation and an apology. Mara led them herself. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. The human ships escorted them from the edge of the solar system, polite but watchful. Things had changed since the last visit. The human fleet was larger now. Their stations orbited every planet. Their technology gleamed with a confidence that made Mira's heart ache. This is what they could have built with us, she thought. This is what we lost. The landing site was the same village where the previous delegation had met Ambassador Tae, but this time a crowd had gathered to meet them. Humans of all ages stood beneath the flowering trees. Watching the alien ship descend, Elder Tae Woo Jin waited at the front of the crowd. He was very old now, leaning on a wooden cane. Beside him stood a young woman with sharp eyes and a calm face. Her name was Kong Jinna, and she represented the new generation of human diplomats. Jin-Ah had been born after the departure. She had grown up on an Earth free from galactic politics. She had never experienced the dismissals, the rejections, the quiet humiliations that had driven her ancestors to leave. But she had studied them. She understood them. And she was determined that such things would never happen again. Mira stepped off the ship and approached the 2 humans. Behind her, the other delegates waited in nervous silence. She had prepared a speech. Pages of carefully chosen words, translated into human language by the best linguists the assembly could find. But standing there, looking into Tae's ancient eyes and Jinna's young ones, she forgot every word. Instead, she simply bowed. "We were wrong," she said. Her voice cracked with emotion, not in policy alone, but in spirit. "We took what you offered, and gave contempt in return. We never saw you as equals. We never tried to understand you. We assumed our ways were better simply because they were ours. She straightened and met their eyes. We do not ask you to forget. We cannot undo what was done. We ask only for the chance to do better, to build something new together, to prove that we have learned from our mistakes. Silence hung over the gathering. The wind rustled through the flowering trees. Somewhere a bird sang. Tae-woo-jin looked at Jinna. The young woman stepped forward. Humanity does not seek revenge, she said. Her voice was steady and clear. We never did. We saw it only to be seen, to be heard, to matter. When that was denied to us, we found our own path. We built our own future. We became something new, she paused. But we did not forget where we came from. We did not forget the stars. And we did not forget that the galaxy is filled with beings who deserve the same chance we took, the chance to grow, to learn, to become better than they were. She extended her hand toward Mira. The galaxy is ready to listen. Then perhaps we are ready to speak again. Mira took her hand. The grip was firm and warm. Behind them, the delegates let out breaths they had been holding. Some of them wept. Others simply stood in wonder. Watching two species take the first step toward something new, the negotiations lasted 3 months. They were not easy. Old wounds do not heal quickly, and trust cannot be rebuilt overnight. But both sides worked with patience and good faith. They argued, compromised, and slowly found common ground. When it was done, humanity rejoined the galactic community. Not as servants or students, but as equals. Their seat in the assembly was filled at last. On the day of the ceremony, Elder Tae-woo-jin sat in that seat himself. His hand shook with age, but his eyes were bright. He had spent his whole life working toward this moment. He had been told 1,000 times that it would never come. He had never stopped believing. High Adjutant Mira opened the session with words that would be remembered for generations. Let this assembly serve as proof that change is possible, that even the oldest hatreds can be healed, that every species, no matter how young or strange or different, has something valuable to offer the stars. She looked at Tae and smiled. Humanity taught us this lesson. They taught it not with weapons or threats, but with patience and quiet strength. They showed us what we had become, and they gave us the chance to become something better. Tae-woo-jin rose slowly from his seat. The chamber fell silent. My people have a saying, he said. The tree that bends with the wind does not break. For 300 years, humanity bent. We bent because we believed that someday the wind would change. He spread his aged hands. The wind has changed. Let us grow together. The assembly rose in applause. Humans and aliens stood side by side, united at last. The galaxy had learned what it meant to lose humanity's quiet. Belief that everyone has something to offer. They would never forget that lesson again.